Charlie, how are you?
Very well, thank you. Yes, I'm plodding on. Yeah, I don't know if you saw my Father's Day post on Sunday or not, but I think that summed up life at the moment, which is, as you know, I'm a dad of an almost 2-year-old,
Yeah.
and wonderful though it is, it does take over your life because, of course, now everything is focused in that direction. So in terms of life and all that stuff, really busy.
Yeah.
But it's wonderful. It's really wonderful. But it does mean it takes away a bit from the music making. But
Yeah.
hey, it's ebbs and flows, and I wouldn't change it for the world. But yes, very well, thank you. I'm
Good.
enjoying being a dad.
Good. Hey, I tell you, it does get a little easier.
So I'm told.
In terms of just kind of managing it and prioritizing your time, but yeah, things like gigs and practice and going out. If you're doing multiple gigs or you're going on tour, all of that has to be like pre-planned weeks in advance. Whereas before you'd be like when I first started going out with my wife, she'd be like, "Oh, what are you doing this weekend?" I said, "Oh, I'm gigging Thursday, Friday, Saturday." She went, "All right, where are you gigging?" I'm like, "I don't know. I just drive to the location, I jump in the van, and then I'm like, oh, we're here today." And she's like, "Oh no, I need to know where you are because I need to know what time you're leaving. I need to know, do we need a babysitter? Do we need to do all this? What we?" Like, oh, right, yeah,
I know you don't realize how relaxed you are
yeah,
until they come along, do you? And
mm,
then, but again, wouldn't change it for the world. Wonderful stuff. But she's an absolute delight.
yeah.
She's started singing recently at nearly
Oh,
2, so
nice.
that's lovely. So there's some music there as well. But yeah, it does mean that playing takes a bit of a backseat, or it has done for the last few years, really since COVID. Actually, I've never really picked the gigging back up, to be honest, after
Yeah.
COVID. You're doing a lot, aren't you? You're doing all the shows and things like that.
I mean, I do a few shows. I've got, I run a function trio, and I dip in some other gigs for other people, a few artist gigs here and there. So yeah, and teaching on top of that. So yeah,
Yeah,
I mean, still pretty busy, but
yeah. Playing wise, I've been quite. Well, I don't know. To be honest, I always liked doing the playing. I used to do lots of function stuff, and I was never in a band, but I was gigging a lot. I was kind of gun for hire type thing.
yeah.
And I always enjoyed doing that, but I didn't really feel. I don't know. I think when COVID came along, it was a welcome break actually, and then I never really felt the need to get back
Yeah.
into that. And I do actually much prefer. I kind of think of myself as a teacher nowadays rather than a player, which once upon a time I would have thought of as a worse thing. I'm just a teacher, but actually I think I am a teacher. I think that's what I like to do, and
Yeah.
I like to play occasionally. But to be honest, I'd rather just go and play for fun rather than it being
Yeah.
a job,
Yeah.
so I don't do it anywhere near as much of that as I'd like to. And again, since my daughter came along, there's been even less. But so I kind of really think of myself as a teacher nowadays.
Okay. Where do you teach?
Well, I am a secondary school teacher,
Yeah.
and I also do private tuition and Zoom lessons and stuff like that as well. But yes, I've been teaching for over 15 years, but I just formalised my teaching, even though I've been a music teacher for over a decade, nearly 2 decades. I finally got the piece of paper from His Majesty the Queen saying that I'm
His Majesty the Queen.
exactly saying that I am actually an official teacher now.
Okay. So were you
fantastic.
teaching? Were you peri teaching, or were you teaching
I
GCSE?
started doing. I started as a peri, and then I've merged into classroom teaching very gradually.
They allowed you to do that without a teaching qualification.
Yeah,
Okay.
not full time. It was always a mixed thing, and over time it's become I'm doing mostly classroom teaching, but outside of school, I've got a little studio, and I do teach from there.
Okay.
One-on-one stuff.
And how do you find classroom teaching curriculum? Or how's the music GCSE curriculum?
It depends on what you think it should be. It depends on what you think the purpose of it is. I think that it is made. What I say to all my students, because I have some students who are in my class, but I also then teach instrumentally, and I say to them, in these lessons, you need to know this stuff, but it's actually not going to make you in any way, knowing what date Mozart was born doesn't mean you're suddenly Eric Johnson on the guitar.
Yeah.
But you do need to know what date, certain people were born. You need to know these facts and historical information. And that's purely to make the exam equally, I believe, to make it an equivalent challenge to the other subjects. If
Right.
it was testing you on the stuff you actually needed to know to be a player, which it's up for debate whether that would be a better or worse exam, but it would definitely be a shorter exam and there'll be less content, I think. So whether it would be more accessible to other people or not, I'm not sure. I think it would probably change the accessibility. But of course, GCSE music is a option in most schools, so it's usually only picked by the kids who've kind of got an aptitude for it naturally, whatever if you believe in natural ability or not.
Okay, so what? Because I do a little bit of Perry teaching in a secondary school, and I can see the gear that they've got, and I think the school that I teach in is quite rare in that they've got quite a well-funded music department. They've built a little studio in there. They've got practice rooms. There's loads of instruments available, and there's always people in these rooms practicing and playing.
Yeah.
There's a huge variety of Perry teachers in the school, and it just seems to be very well supported. There's PCs, and I walked into one of the classrooms today just to borrow some manuscript paper, and the teacher was taking them through like how to use, I assume it's something like Sibelius or Pro Tools or something. They were writing out scores, copying, pasting, moving bars around, and that was kind of all I heard. That a brief 20 seconds, but I was like, wow, we had nothing of that when I did GCSE music, so. Is that on the syllabus? Is that?
Yeah, so you can now do if you're not a performer, you can do music production, or it's loosely called music production. It's kind of a vague combination of production and engineering and mastering and all these skills. It's music production. So you can do that as your performance option instead nowadays.
Okay.
Which I think is good. I think you can actually do DJing as well now, actually, but we don't offer that. But yes, you can do that. It's just showing an attempt at mastering one of the musical skills. And I think that's good because 15 years ago you didn't have that as an option. You either could play or you couldn't play, and therefore you either could do the exam or you couldn't do the exam. I do think that's good. But yeah, it's just showing trying to show a blend of different skills and be open to everybody. I think. The tech side of stuff, I think because everything, like us chatting now, this is all browser based. Everyone has access to a browser really nowadays. And I saw an article on BBC recently, and it was talking about music production and equality of opportunities in that field. And I think it's never been an easier time. I think most people, and obviously there are people who don't, but most people have a phone in their pocket, and you can now, I'm sure probably there's been some commercially successful albums released on a phone, I would imagine, recorded mostly on a phone nowadays. But it's all there, and so I think it's a lot more accessible than it used to be. Whereas if you had a passion for the pipe organ or something once upon a time, it's not the sort of thing you just pop in your pocket. So the accessibility, I think, is a lot better now, which is great. I think that's great.
Yeah, I mean, it's just one of those things it's just removing barriers from creativity.
Absolutely,
which I think can only be a good thing, just so long as people have access to the bare minimum, and
that's exactly it. Yeah,
supported and encouraged. Which it sounds like, well, certainly from my experience in all the schools that I teach in, it does seem to be like that.
Yeah, I think there's this. I think middle ability players, and I'm meaning players of all ages here, it's probably the same in everything. It's probably the same with I don't know, people who go to the gym and stuff like that. People who are like in the middle of the stage are usually the most judgmental, I find. And the people who are good-ish are usually the most critical of those who are less good. And actually, I think the people, the stereotype in the gym would be that the meatheads, with the massive muscles would be judging the overweight bloke for coming in for the first time. But I think actually they're probably the most supportive. They're probably the one thinking, good for you, because they've done it and they know what it takes. And they're probably the ones most likely to be thinking, good for you. I think in the world of academic music, perhaps, there has been this kind of elitism. And even probably myself at GCSE age, if I'd been told people can just do this on a computer and do music production. I've gone, are you serious? Like, that's it? I've been practicing the guitar every night and all this sort of thing. But yes, you can do it, and I think that's really good. I think it's brilliant that everyone can find a way in. And they might start with music production and then pick up a guitar, and then pick up a drum or something, and find their way in through that. But I think having that access is probably. I think it's probably the easiest it's ever been. I think obviously there's always more we can do to improve that, but definitely the easiest it's ever been, and I think that's only a good thing.
Yeah, I agree. Is there anything on the GCSE curriculum that? Oh, sorry, I phrased that wrong. Do you think there's what should be on the curriculum that isn't? Is there anything missing, like severely lacking?
I think it's still quite. I think it should be more relevant to a modern musician,
Right.
and so I think with all music education, whether it's probably all education, full stop, it's fantastic to look back and see the wonderful things that have happened throughout the history of music, and it's important to be aware of those. I do think it's important to be aware of them. However, we are teaching people who are going to be musicians in the future. We kind of have to make an educated guess about, well, where's music going?
Yeah.
And kind of prepare them for that. And I'm not necessarily sure that having, well, obviously you can't teach for the future. You can't predict where the future is going, but it can feel very backwards looking, very backwards looking. Again, having that foundational understanding of the historical context is important. I'm not trying to dismiss that, but maybe it's a bit heavily emphasized in academic music, and but again, it depends. Why is someone learning music? Because if you're wanting to study GCSE music because your goal is to be a music historian, then it's absolutely fantastic because it's exactly what you want. Whereas if your goal is to be a music producer or a DJ or a I don't know, a session guitarist in 10, 15 years time, that's kind of where you're going to be really, getting heavily into your career. I'm not sure that particular qualification is equipping you particularly well for it. So it really depends. And GCSEs aside, I think we all learn music for different reasons in terms of again being judgmental to worse players. Someone might just want to play Wonderwall. That might be why they picked up the guitar in the first place. They just want to play Wonderwall, and they do that, and they do it for the rest of their life, and it brings them so much joy. Whereas, us nerds who get really heavily into this stuff, probably obsessively so, we're constantly striving to improve and get better. But that's not better. That's just different. We're doing it for a different reason, and so I think probably there's probably a better balance in the GCSE and A-level syllabus. But there is BTEC, of course, which is a slightly different thing. So, there's options available for everyone, I think.
Oh, yeah. I mean, like I said, when I actually took GCSE music because I didn't want to take art or drama. And when the head of music saw my name on the list, he was like, "You've got to be joking. Like, I possessed no musical or had displayed any musical aptitude." But I just remember falling in love with music like passionately at the age of about 15. And it was hearing Wonderwall. Like, I'd gone through this really weird phase of, like, my parents listened to like the Eagles, Carole King, U2, Simon and Garfunkel. So I had like a really good grounding in like good pop music. And then I went into this really weird kind of techno jungle happy hardcore phase in like the mid 90s.
Brilliant.
And then kind of got pulled back with Oasis, and I just remember I was like doing my exams and just being kind of embedded in music, but not really having kind of any idea of where I could go or what to do. And I didn't pick up the guitar till I was 17. But I just remember just having this shift in perspective when it came to music. And
this happens all the time. This is really common, especially because it's an option. You have to do maths, you have to do English at school nowadays. But you get kids in year 7, 8, and 9 who the entire time have gone, I'm not doing music anyway. Like, what? I'm not going to listen. What's the point? And you think, well, there's no way they're going to do music. They're very vocal about how they're not going to do music. Then they see what their options are at the end of year 9 and go, oh, well, I'll just do music then. But, best of a bad bunch. And so then you do think, oh god, because then these kids are 3 years behind because they've spent 3 years switched off because they thought they weren't going to do music.
Yeah.
And then, oh dear, they're suddenly sat in your GCSE class and you've got to try and catch up 3 years. And they're sat in there with kids who had decided they were going to do music. The other end of the spectrum, you've got the kids who you desperately, because ultimately it's a qualification factor, isn't it? You've got your eye on some kids from year 7. You think they're going to do really well. They're going to get us some good results. And then they end up doing the triple sciences and double languages and stuff, and don't have that slot available for music anymore. Despite the fact that they were a really competent player and could have done well. Perhaps at home there's still that music's not a proper subject. Sentimentality, which doesn't help. But so you actually end up with quite a lot of kind of middle to low band kids, and that's just part of the job. And of course they're always going to be there. You do your best for them, but you don't actually know. And then you get that rare student that sounds like yourself who had zero interest in it, and then ends up really kind of getting somewhere with it.
Yeah,
taking to
it's
it.
cool. I know I've had a few students recently that came in who had just started their GCSEs. I'm like, oh, did you take music GCSE? And they've come in for like private guitar lessons.
Yeah.
And I was like, it's a shame because that would have been an easy A for you.
Exactly. This is it. But I think there's possibly other subjects, those really kind of top set bright kids. I think they need certain subjects on their GCSEs. Whereas, as you know, when you apply for a job, you can just write 8 GCSEs or whatever, and if you got if it's a music job, you'd maybe put a star in music or whatever, but then and plus 9 others, put what you got in maths. But I don't think people hiring generally care what you've got. It's just how many you got, really, isn't it? But unless you've got a specific goal in mind, and then in which case, fair play. So have you got Oasis tickets then, is the big question, of course.
Do you know what? I did.
Me too.
What date are you going?
I'm going to Edinburgh on the 8th or 18th, is it, of August?
Yeah, we got Wembley on the 26th.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean,
it's going to be cool. It's going to be so cool.
It was one of those things, like I got so wrapped up in it, like, and I kind of lost interest in Oasis after their second album.
Yeah.
But I was just like, I was so embedded, and I doubled down on everything when the third album came out, and I listened to it. I loved it, and then kind of reality hit it. I was like, actually, that's because I started then going backwards through music. I started listening to more like Nirvana, Pearl Jam, Soundgarden, and then back into the 80s, like AC/DC, Whitesnake, Van Halen, all the shreddy metal stuff. And then when I look back at Oasis, I'm like, okay, first 2 albums, great, love them. Third album is a bit iffy, and then everything after that I just kind of dwindled off. And I got so wrapped up in the tickets, I was like, it'll be amazing. And I bought them, I got them, and I went, I feel a little bit deflated now.
Yeah, well, I'm already dreading the logistics of it because it's I think it's the same week as the Fringe Festival.
Right, okay.
So luckily I've got a sofa to sleep on. But or it has already crossed my mind. Oh, shall I just sell the tickets? Like I don't know if I can be bothered because I'm in Newcastle, or not far off, and so it's still a bit of a trek up to Edinburgh, But I'm sure it's one of those things that once I'm there, probably quite a kind of almost emotional experience because Oasis were like my first wow, I love Oasis. I love this band. They were like one of the first ones. Oasis, Manic Street Preachers, Coldplay. I like Rush of Blood to the Head, that album, and What's the Story, Morning Glory, that was me. But I also loved like the Eagles. I had that is it the Greatest Hits album, the one with the vinyl on the front cover? I can't even remember now. It's like
my dad had a weird one. It was like navy blue, or no, like a pale blue, and the Eagles was written in like this weird metallic electric blue writing. Right, that was it. And Hotel California as well. But I don't remember that one. But yeah, it'll be an experience. I got tickets for me and the wife, so
it's going to be great.
I've got a sneaking suspicion she'll be like, I don't want to go. It's like, okay, so.
Yeah.
But
hi, darling. My daughter's coming in.
That's cool, man. They they seem to find the perfect way to interrupt, but it's cool. So I wanted to chat about your jazz playing. the Greg Koch video that he retweeted, reposted, or shared of you, because that's really what dragged me to you, was your playing, your jazz playing, and your approach to it. So, if people don't know, what's your methodology towards it?
Well, just to be really clear, my handle on Instagram is not quite jazz, because I don't consider myself to be a jazz player. And just like we're talking about, I still love Oasis and Coldplay and all these bands. Like I kind of just love everything, and so I'm constantly interested in all styles of music and trying to pick up new things in them. But I definitely wouldn't call myself a jazz player, although it's probably one of the things that I listen to the most jazz, definitely nowadays.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm kind of very much in that world. But so my belief in the world of jazz is that it doesn't have to come from a theory approach. Now, it's not, you shouldn't do a theory approach at all, because of course there's wonderful players who have come to jazz via places like Berkeley and doing their own study, things like the Mark Levine book. These things are absolutely wonderful. But that my own journey, I didn't personally find those very helpful.
Mm-hmm.
And I was I was very far ahead with my theory. I got a diploma when I was 14 in specifically in music theory. I did my grade 8 theory when I was 12 or 13, ABRSM. So I was a theory person, and the reason I did those is because I loved theory. I like theory. But I still found it really hard to get into. And I realized what most people, I think, realize is that although I probably went through this slightly arrogant stage as a teenager where I was telling everyone I'm a jazz guitarist, you know. And yet I was sitting at home listening to Oasis and well, actually at that stage I was in my Dream Theater phase, and still love Dream Theater. You know, I never move on from these. I listen to these things less, but I think some people are almost a bit embarrassed to admit what they used to like, you know. But no, still love it. I love all this stuff. So Dream Theater, I was a massive Dream Theater fan. Steve Vai, Satriani, Yngwie, saw them all quite a few times. And so that's what I was consuming. That was my input. And then I was telling everyone as a jazz guitarist, but wondering why my jazz chops weren't getting much
Jazzy.
Better. Exactly. And so anyway, yes, I studied at York, and I was lucky enough to have some sessions with a piano player called John Taylor, who sadly died a couple of years ago. But John Taylor was like the top British piano player. He played, I think his very last album was with Chris Potter on the saxophone. So, and he did stuff with Kenny Wheeler, and just a beautiful player, a really, really lovely man. And I remember this one moment where you could sign up for like a 30-minute lesson with him, sort of thing, come along and play. And I put my name down. I thought, I'm a jazz guitarist. And I went in, and he was sat there at this stunning Fazioli piano. I can kind of picture the scene. It's kind of burned into my mind. It's probably due to embarrassment. And he said, "What do you want to play?" And he's a really lovely, friendly man. And I said, let's do Autumn Leaves. Which, again, nothing wrong with Autumn Leaves, but it kind of indicates the level that I was at, really, with my jazz playing. Okay, let's play Autumn Leaves. And so we started playing Autumn Leaves. He said, "You take the melody." And within 8 bars, I was just completely lost. I didn't know where we were. We were just playing the head. We hadn't even got past the A section yet, and I was already totally lost, because he wasn't just going da, 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 da. He wasn't just outlining the changes for me the way that I was used to in a backing track. He was playing something really beautiful and musical, and I just realized at that moment I haven't got a clue. I'm so out here, like I have not got a clue. And so that was kind of really. I was probably 20, 21 then. That was kind of the really important moment. I thought, right, if I'm going to go around saying I'm a jazz guitarist, I really need to kind of get into this. And of course, I've learned my lesson now, not quite jazz. Then started Pat Metheny and all this sort of thing. It was a friend of mine actually sent me Facing East or Facing West? Facing West, I think it is, off Secret Story. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that album. But
I'm not, no.
It was... because he knew I had a good ear, he said, "Can you help me transcribe this?" And I didn't know the track at all. I thought, this is really cool. It actually reminded me of the Phil Collins soundtrack to Tarzan. And I thought, that's cool. I like it. It's kind of had this jungly vibe to it. And that really that album, although I wouldn't say it's necessarily very good as a model for what to aim for jazz, because it's very world music-y, that album. That was for me the real turning point. And so then I realized, of course, I'm just not doing enough listening, and when I am listening, I'm listening to the wrong things. And so then 15 or so years later, I've really focused on that, just really listening, and trying to avoid getting too heavily into the theory stuff. I know the theory stuff, and I like the theory stuff, and I'm excited by it. I like talking about it, but I try to get my students to learn to play first, following a language model. Learn to play badly first, because the problem for all early improvisers, and I am kind of talking about improvising musicians here. Of course, you need to learn to read music if you want to be a session musician, but I'm talking about improvising as a skill. I think we're so worried about playing something wrong, playing a wrong note, that we kind of freeze. And so actually learning to play free and badly, and it's not play something good, it's play something. And then you have the rest of your life to make it good. And there's ultimately only 12 notes. And so I think most people, if they do enough listening, you mentioned chord tones before, if you know the chord tones, the theory I recommend to my students is you learn chord tones of major sevens, minor sevens, dominant sevens, minor seven flat fives, and diminished sevens, because you need to know those. Voicings all over the neck. And then the major scale. And again, it's not just learn to play the major scale, it's try and find something new in the major scale every day for the rest of your life. Master the major scale. I'm nowhere near a master of the major scale, but every time I consider it, I think of something else, and I go, actually, I've never thought of that before. Rather than, now the melodic minor, now the harmonic minor, now diminished scales and messiaen modes and all this sort of stuff. And so I think for most people, if they just focused on those things and listened as much as you possibly can, they would get, I don't want to say a better result, but for me, it's been a result that I'm much happier with my playing, having followed that approach, than I was with the theory-led approach. And my playing is certainly not for everyone, but it's kind of learning to be comfortable with that. It's like, this is my playing, and if you don't like it, I said this to Greg Koch. I said, I put off putting these stupid videos on Instagram for so long, because I was talking to my wife about it. It's like, I was just basically worried that people were just going to say it's just wrong notes. And of course, some people do. People do say it's just wrong notes. And I said that to Greg, and he said, well, he worded it. You know what he's like? He words these things so well. But he said, I think he said one man's wrong notes is another man's gnarly shit or something like that. I don't know what he said, but it was just like, And so there's been certain people who have really taken to it, and it's been really nice. But so it's, to actually directly answer your question, major scale, chord tones, and outside playing, getting used to playing wrong. I think the outside playing is something which most players kind of end up wanting to be able to do that. Most of us find Alan Holdsworth very inaccessible when we're 12 and 13, but by the time I
still find him inaccessible at 44.
It's totally to play it, but just to listen to it. I mean, when I was 14 or first heard Holdsworth, I remember being 20 and my older brother trying to convince me that Holdsworth's good. And I really don't get it, man. Where's the melodies? And now, beautiful melodies. Of course it is. It's amazing stuff. But I think most of us end up wanting to do that outside thing. And starting that from day one, I think most of us would look back and be pleased that we did.
Yeah, I mean, I think, going back to just, playing without that theory approach, because, I mean, I've tried on multiple occasions to play jazz, and to reiterate, or to even almost confirm what you said, I wasn't listening to it. And I remember having lessons with a guy, and I had about 3 or 4 lessons. He gave me all these kind of exercises. And I was going through the exercises, but at the same time listening to Tool, and then coming back to the lessons. I'm like, I'm not getting it.
Yeah.
And I sat down in a lesson, and I just said, look, I think the big problem for me is I don't listen to jazz.
Yeah.
And he was like, well, you fucking should.
Exactly.
And the other thing is, like, when we learn to talk, we don't learn to talk by figuring out what verbs are and what adjectives are and how we just listen to the sounds, we babble along. And like with your daughter, like, you can hear her in the background, kind of,
Sorry.
she's just making all these sounds, but that's her trying to just to key into the language, the rhythm that we talk with, the pitches and
Exactly.
the words. And that's kind of the same thing. And I
And what you
think,
don't say to my daughter when she says a word wrong, I don't go, "That was rubbish. Stop talking. Don't
yeah,
try again. You're never going to be able to talk." You
yeah,
go, "Well done. That was amazing. That was really good. It was terrible,
yeah,
but it was amazing." You know,
yeah, yeah,
and you keep going. And of course, barring any learning challenges, most kids can talk pretty confidently by the time they're 3 or 4. But one of the things that I've got a lady who I nearly said old lady, which I won't say, a retiree
yeah.
who she was feeling a bit disappointed with her playing recently. She's a piano player, and I said, compare your progress to what you would expect from a child learning a language for the amount of time you've been studying the piano in this case.
Yeah.
And I was, how long have you been studying piano for? I think she's been studying for nearly 3 years. And she's happy with parts of her playing, but disappointed with others. And obviously, we focus on the things we're not happy with rather than patting ourselves on the back. I mean, you're not going to get much of a conversation out of a 3-year-old. It's going to be random. It's going to be all over the place. It's going to be scattered. There's going to be words mispronounced. It's just going to be totally. To be honest, you're not going to get much of a good conversation out of most 15-year-olds either. But even some 20-year-olds who are pushing it. But it really does take to master language. And we see people, when you see someone who's a really good speaker, it's so impressive. And yet we spend all day, every day practicing speaking. There's nothing we've actively done more than speaking that I can think of. And yet we stumble over our words all the time. I'm a terrible speaker. I'm always embarrassed about how often I'm stumbling over my words. And I have spoken far more than whatever my second most frequent skill is. And so if we can't even master that, we're never going to master music. And it's very annoying when you see an amazing musician. It's kind of, it's a brilliant thing. It's amazing. But just like when you see someone who's an amazing speaker, even if you don't agree with what they're saying or anything like that, just like how articulate they are, it's so impressive. Like, it's such a wonderfully impressive skill.
And
powerful. Super powerful.
And
it's not even the message necessarily. It's how they're choosing to convey it. My wife's really good at this. My wife always says things in a way that, like, oh, I wish I'd come up with that. And I'm going, well, it's sort of a bit like what you know. I just like getting my words out, rambling on like I always do. But so I think comparing our musical journey, and I really believe music as a language, to the progress we would make learning. Definitely, as an adult learner, you can maybe compare it to learning a second language, learning a non-native language. It's most people never achieve that, let alone do it in 6 months. So we've got to be kind of quite fair to ourselves and make sure we're working on the right things, but not get too carried away with the what's the grammar of this language, what's the whatever. Just immerse yourself in films, immerse yourself in music, immerse yourself in whatever to learn that language. That's the Dr. Stephen Krashen approach. He calls this comprehensible input, and that's kind of where I've pinched that approach. I've still not quite figured out exactly how to apply it to music, but that's something I've been thinking about quite a lot for the last kind of year or so, is how can I get my students doing this? And I've got one student in particular at the minute who's a soprano sax player, and he's been playing the saxophone for probably about 3 years now. He's been studying with me for 2. He studied with my wife for a year beforehand, doing really fundamental, foundational things. And he is an incredible improviser, this guy. He's 15, and theory-wise, he knows hardly anything. And I do occasionally say to him, he'll sometimes ask in a lesson like a slightly theory-led question, and I'll give him a very annoying answer where I'll say, like, well, we will discuss that in the future, but for now, just think about it this way. Give a really general, very low theory approach. And so one of the things I get him to do is playing chord tones, and in particular playing the key chord tone. If it's in C major, playing the chord tones of of C over most of the tune. Then when you get to something like an altered chord, just playing totally random at first. We're not using altered scales, we're not using diminished scales, we're not using Lydian dominance, all this wonderful stuff. We're just playing random. And how far can we get with that before we have to start shaping it into something a bit more specific? And this lad, after just 2 years, is a really phenomenal player. And I'd be surprised if there was many 15-year-old sax players who are as far along as this lad is. Everyone who hears him was blown away. That's mostly because of his hard work. I don't want to take the credit for that, but my point is he's put in lots of hard work. And if you asked him theory-based questions, he would sound like he knows nothing. He's really low theory, but it doesn't matter to his result.
Yeah, I mean, I was talking to when you do long gig drives. I was chatting to someone in the car, like as you do, and we were talking about I can't remember exactly how we got onto it. But we got talking about a friend of mine who's a sax player, phenomenal player, very low theory. He's quite high, I think, on the autism spectrum. And I said to my friend, I said, look, I gave him a lift. This guy, his name's John. I said, I gave John a lift to a gig. And I started asking him, John, how do you approach playing over 2-5-1s? And he's like, what do you mean? He's like, when you're playing D minor, G7, C major 7. And he's looking at me like, what do you mean? I was like, well, okay, D minor. What would you play over D minor? He goes, well, he's like, that's not really how I think about music. I said, I'm not thinking about it linearly. No, vertically. I'm thinking linear. I'm thinking about melody, where it's going, where I want it to go, and ultimately where it's going to end up. I said, I'm not thinking of this is D minor, now it's G7, then it's C. He said, it's just not the way that my brain works. I would just hear the sound of whatever that is. I can hear that that's a minor 7 sound. I don't think he had perfect pitch, but he wasn't far off. And he would just start playing lines over that fit the sound. And that's no different to if you were dropped into the middle of a conversation, that you could pick up what they're talking about quite quickly, whether it was a heated argument and there's going to be a fight, or if it was something lively and jolly or funny, you would be able to input as well if you had done enough listening.
Yeah, and it doesn't matter if you occasionally mispronounce a word or use the wrong word, because people can tell from the context of what you're saying what word you intended to use, or the point you're trying to make. But yeah, you hear this with... this was one of my frustrations in studying, was how unhelpful interviews with pros were. You'd watch these... You'd study these books. You'd read the David Baker books or the Mark Levine books. Those were a couple that I really liked. I was really into those. And it says think X, Y, Z on this chord, and on this chord think whatever. And then you'd watch an interview with, I don't know, Mike Brecker or whatever, and he said, "I'm just playing." It's like, well, how unhelpful! Don't just play. Tell me exactly what you're playing. Or another thing that I never quite got, what was very frustrating for me, was I'd maybe transcribe a bar of Brecker or something like that. And I'd go, I'm kind of 7 notes into a bar, and I go, oh, so far it's the altered scale. Oh, this is really exciting. And then I do an 8th note, and that's not the altered scale anymore. Oh, it must be something else. Yeah. When all he's done is he was thinking the altered scale, but he added a chromatic passing note at some point. Now, to him, of course he did. He just added it in. He wasn't thinking, I'm going to now not play the altered scale. Yeah. And I think someone like Brecker probably was thinking, I'm going to play the altered scale. I think he did think in terms of that kind of theory. I get the feeling he did. But to me, as a student, I was ignorant of that. So I thought as soon as there's a note that doesn't fit the scale anymore, well, now it's not the scale. It was the scale. It just had a chromatic note as well. And trying to decipher that when you feel like you're outside of this world of jazz, trying to find your way in and seeing all these little things that people just do. Why? Because it sounds good. Because you just do, or because they needed an extra note to land on the resolution on time. And that's why they're doing these things. Bebop scales is another good example, because a bebop scale is just adding a passing note between each degree of a chord. So you get the 4 notes of the chord and then the 4 passing notes to give you that full 8 bar, so that you land on beat 1. But we're only told it's that's often not highlighted. It's often it's just added an extra note so that you land on time, but it's adding an extra note so that each chord tone has a passing note. And so just little subtle things like that. I mean, it's 6 and 2 3s, but it really does make a big difference when you're trying to understand this stuff.
Yeah.
When you're trying to find your way in, it's really, really tough. The way you're describing that sax player is the way that was a really important book for me. Hal Galper, Forward Motion. Hal Galper, the Brecker brothers, both played in his band in the 80s, I think. And he talks about this in one of the pages of that book, which was just like such a revelation for me. There was a couple of books which really kind of, I think, did this really well, and that was one of them. But he wrote a solo over a set of changes. I can't remember what the changes were now, but where he just made sure that on the strong beats there was a chord tone, and his point was what happens between the beats, between the strong beats, and where the strong beats are changes depending on the vibe of the song. But as long as those are secure, you can get away with murder between them. And he writes this ludicrous solo, and it sounds killer. It sounds absolutely amazing. I was like, that's the sound I want. That's what I want to, that's the sound that I'm after. Because it can get a bit dooba 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 when you're following the rules. They can get a bit square, and that's kind of, again, it's a bit looking backwards, and it's amazing when people can do that really well. When people can do traditional jazz really well, it's amazing. But I think most people, I wouldn't want to generalize, but me definitely, I like the modern sounds. I want those, and I find the books don't really necessarily help you with that.
Okay. And how do you what's your approach to practicing these days, especially with a small child?
It's really, my practice is really bad at the minute, to be honest. It's really bad. And one of the things I try and do is play at work. I try and, any excuse to actually sit with the guitar. I try and force relevancy to me holding a guitar, but it's often I'll go days without playing at work. It's hard to find those opportunities. The girls go to bed at about 8 o'clock, and then I try and I get jobs done, and then try and pick the axe up. But it's very low quality practice at the minute.
Okay,
it's I'll often just put songs on and play over. I think when you've got such a small amount of time, it has to be efficient practice. Yeah. So you're probably if you started when you were 17, you probably remember it not necessarily being convenient to just get a backing track.
No, there was none of that.
No, and it's so easy now. But back to this kind of input-output language model. If you're playing over a backing track, which I do all the time, by the way, they're fantastic and it's fun, but you're not getting much input. And what I used to do, us old timers back in the day, is you'd put on your favorite song and just play over the top, and you're kind of getting input at the same time. Now it's not perfect, and it's kind of like having a conversation where you're talking over each other, but you hear something and then you could kind of model it. You go, oh, that was cool. I'm going to try and do that for the next 30 seconds, try and emulate what I just heard. I heard John Mayer talking about this as well, saying that we used to just arrogantly blow over other people's solos. You listen to B.B. King and you're just going, that's what we did. And so I've actually kind of, because of this recent this kind of thought that I've been having about this language model, I've actually been doing that quite a lot. It's just putting on songs of players who I want to sound like and arrogantly playing over the top of them, picking up on ideas that I'm hearing. But I find it's quite hard to have a balanced routine when you work. Well, I'm more than full time, I'm full time plus. Yeah, and I want to be a present dad as well, So it is really tough. And as a teenager, I was doing. I was the guy falling asleep with the guitar in my hand. It was just all evening. As soon as I got home, I was playing guitar, and that was it. Easily 5 hours a night, no bother. But it wasn't really 5 quality hours. It was just noodling. And so, what I do isn't perfect practice, and it's very different to what I would do, given the freedom of time. But I just kind of make it work, and I just play. Really, I'm just playing and trying to listen as much as possible through the day as well, trying to get that input.
Yeah, I think listening is one of the, and I've said this a lot on this podcast. I think listening is it's almost like the cheat code for music.
Exactly.
If you're not listening, how much can you learn? I mean, we've spoken a lot about languages. If you wanted to learn French, one of the first things I would do if I was going to sit down and learn French is I wouldn't buy a French book. I would go and listen to people speaking French.
Yeah.
Listen to how the rhythm, like simple transactions in French.
Yeah.
Listen to how the rhythm of the words, maybe the different dialects, maybe even the different accents, or that's what I would do. And it shows that if you go on, like when I've gone on holiday, if I go to Spain or to France, I can pick up the language a lot quicker just by sitting and listening, and just by trying to replicate what I hear, and like having a go, trying to order something in French, and then you get a response back. You're like, oh fuck, I
Exactly.
didn't catch that. No, I just want this. That's what 2 beers, please.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's the Stephen Krashen hypothesis, is that I mean it's proven, it's proven anecdotally as well as through his research now. But his point is, it's not understanding every single word; it's understanding the message that was meant. And it can seem like you're not learning much. And maybe afterwards, if someone quizzed you on it, you wouldn't get anything right. But in the moment, you understood what you're being told. And his example that he gave, he does it in German, but I'm a really low-level Japanese speaker. I'm terrible, but I'll demonstrate. But his example was with his hand. He goes, in Japanese it would be "kore wa te desu," and he says, "Well, how much German in his case? How much Japanese have you just learned?" Well, nothing. But if you go "kore wa te desu," and it's like, okay, that's something to do with it's something to do with exactly what it is. I don't know yet. And then "kore wa kao desu, kore wa kami desu, kore wa ha desu." I'm running out of words now. Hana desu. Okay, well, these are objects, and then what's kore wa desu? It's probably this is, or something along those lines. Now, you're not learning it word for word, but if you hear that 100, 200, 500 times, this is the way children learn language. Of course, they're not studying it on a word by word basis. They get the point, and over time, with enough examples, you go, oh, I think they're saying this is a, and so understanding the message of the language. So in music, again, this is me. I'm still trying to work out exactly what the parallels are here. And maybe there are no parallels. Maybe, maybe I'm forcing the point a little bit. But these are the sort of exercises I like to consider. This is actually, to go back to your last question, this is kind of the practice I do nowadays, actually just thinking a lot about music, and not necessarily actually being able to, keep my chops up necessarily, but just thinking about it. But yeah, I think in music, the different styles are more like different accents than different languages. I think music is the language. But, if someone comes up, I remember I moved up to the Northeast when I was 4, I think. And my dad's side of the family is from the Northeast, but he went to Durham University, and he's ended up with, I think he was trying to impress my mum, who's got a very posh accent. I think he kind of lost his accent a bit.
Right.
And so I never really heard the accent until we moved up here. And I remember getting really confused because people were saying, like, give it to us.
Yeah.
And that's give it to me here. But I was like, us? Who? You and who? Things like that. And I remember as a 4-year-old thinking that. Like, I specifically remember a dinner lady saying that, and me thinking, what on earth? Is she mad? If you don't understand these languages, I've lived here my entire life now, so even people with a really thick accent, I can tell exactly what they're saying. Whereas I've seen videos on YouTube of, like, can you translate the Geordie? And people in the comments like, what the hell is he saying? And to me, like, now it's just, I know what he's saying. So I think it's more like that. It's an accent of, like, well, how am I going to say this musical language? And obviously, in the world of jazz, it can get quite complicated. It can become quite a dense language that's quite hard to compared to pop, which is designed to be popular. It's designed to be accessible, and so I think that's really the difference. So immersing yourself, but initially it has to be comprehensible, which is why most of us come from Oasis and Coldplay, because we kind of understand the musical message. I can hear I understand the key. I can hear how the chords and melody are related. Not necessarily consciously, just subconsciously, I can hear those connections. Whereas if you're hearing someone blowing over a really complicated set of changes, and what they're playing is a superimposition, and it doesn't even relate, it can be really hard. What is that accent? And so I do think you've got to kind of start, for a lot of us, maybe even starting with music that maybe we're not that passionate about. Maybe it feels too simple, feels too babyish. But actually, that's probably where the results are for even for adult learners. It's like, let's go right back to basics. Do you understand what you're hearing?
Yeah. It's no, it's like a never-ending quest, isn't it?
Yeah,
This search for for understanding or even meaning in music. It's like I see it a lot with students that come through my door, and I had one kid turn up. He was, I don't know, he's probably early 20s, and he like wanted to learn metal. He's like, it's just metal.
yeah,
I just want to do metal. I was like, all right, okay, well, like, I asked him what he was into, and he gave me a list of bands, half of which I'd never heard of. And so he had his guitar, and I was like, right, okay, so this is a G chord, and this is how we strum it in time. And I could see his face kind of drop, and I said, no, I can see it. I can see your face has dropped. You're really disappointed, but this, like, if you can strum a G chord in time, make it sound musical, that's a foundation for playing heavy metal. If you can't play in time, you haven't got a hope in hell of playing metal, because that is so rhythmically
of course, yeah,
prominent. Like lots of 16th or triplet gallops. You want to look at Maiden or Megadeth or Metallica, that kind of thing. It's so rhythmically tight, and you've got to be so on the fucking ball
yeah.
that you need to be able to strum a G chord and play, Stand By Me or Oasis or Wonderwall.
Exactly, yeah.
You've got to be able to do that. You might not want to play it later, but you have to be able to do it if you want to do the metal thing, because you need to have a good foundation in rhythm.
Yeah, it's totally fundamental, isn't it? And there's an argument in this comprehensible input world where there is a balance to be had between, well, for example, for most of us learning a second language, sitting watching children's TV is probably unrealistic. We're not going to sit and watch cartoons for most of us, because you're actually probably undermining yourself at that point, because there's also got to be a minimum level of interest, and so there's a sweet spot there. There's a guy who does those. You've probably seen these videos where he goes and speaks perfect Japanese to, he's a white guy and goes and speaks perfect Japanese in Japan, and they're like, whoa.
I think I've seen that. Yeah,
and he's called Matt versus Japan, and he's regarded as having a genuine, like, on the phone you would just assume he was Japanese. His accent's that good,
right.
And he talks about this, and he says that. For him, it was watching all the anime and stuff, which I can't really get into that, but it is aimed at adults. It is aimed for adults. So he just watched that, and he didn't understand hardly any of it at first. He didn't really know what was getting. But over a decade, you start picking up on these messages, and so there's a balance to be had, because of course you don't want to put your students off. You don't want to, especially nowadays. I do find that the kids are really much more so than I think. When I was playing, that it has to be something cool, but not right. What they think's cool, not what someone else thinks cool. And you've got to be really, you've got to really try and keep it relevant. But at the same time, do you like music or not? If you like music, you'll balance that out and say, well, look, this might not be the coolest song in the world, but if you like music, this is going to help you to get into Metallica and trying to play Tool when you've got no sense of time. I mean, it's just not going to happen, So there's a balance to be had, isn't there? And but I think that can put off a lot of people, is not working on material that they like. So you got to find that. That was me with jazz, listening. As much as I love Charlie Parker now, I'd listen to go like, it's a rubbish quality recording. It's kind of it sounds almost sped up, because it's not. It's the pitch is wavering. It just sounds weird. I don't like it. But listen how cool the language is, man. I can't get into it. My journey was a bit similar, actually, because I had a teacher for a short period of time, a guitar teacher, and I took Passion and Warfare, the Steve Vai album. I took the tab book. I had the tab book. I think I've still got it somewhere. I took that along and said, like, how does he know what notes to play on the chords? That was the exact question I asked. And again, I was probably 17 or 18. I already had a diploma in music theory and GCSE, and possibly I was working towards my A levels at that point. And I didn't know, chord scale relationships. I didn't know that. And he said, well, he probably gave me Autumn Leaves or something. He said he's thinking like a jazz player. I'd probably slightly disagree with that now, but I know the point he was making is, it's, if you study jazz, the chord scale relationships are certainly prioritized. That they're clearer in that setting. So he set me off with Autumn Leaves or whatever, and much like yourself, I then just kept on listening to Steve Vai and wondered why my jazz chops weren't getting any better. So
so before I go, I want to just quickly chat about, like, what do you think it is to get better? How does it relate to you at the moment, getting better?
Well, for me, back to what I said at the start, we all play for different reasons. The reason I have always played, and I think this is possibly why I feel really comfortable. I like calling myself a teacher now rather than a player. I've never really had. I appreciate this seems ironic as someone who is on Instagram, but I haven't been on Instagram. It's a very recent thing. I've never had that compulsion to like. I've learned this thing. Now let's go and show everyone. It's always been. It's actually been like for me. It's always been a meditation, and I didn't realize that until I read Effortless Mastery, which is one of my favorite books by Kenny Werner, who's just a wonderful,
you're about
wonderful
the
piano player.
fourth or fifth person who's recommended that book.
It is absolutely wonderful. There is a second one, which he wrote about 15, 20 years later, but it kind of just echoes the point of the first with a couple of extra anecdotes. But reading that book really, and watching his Google chat or whatever he did like an interview with Google about it, and that really kind of changed the game for me. He talks about music in such a sound first way. It's like the example I always give. There's a couple of examples I always use in my teaching, but one of them is he talks about making progress, and he says, we're always thinking about progress as musicians, making progress, and yet things that you do more frequently than practicing, something like brushing your teeth.
Yeah,
you don't brush your teeth twice a day and go, I'm really getting somewhere here. I'm really, I'm really becoming an expert.
I got that bit of bacon out.
I feel I'm a real master at brushing my teeth. You just do it. You just do the brushing your teeth the same way that most of us who are, still doing music at our age, we just do it. It's not necessarily because it's your job and it's not because you've got to go out and play. I just do it anyway. And so for me, it's a meditation. And I tried actual meditation and was really underwhelmed with it. I remember in my 20s, like trying to get into that spiritual stuff as someone who was quite, as you can imagine, again, as doing all that theory stuff as early as I did, I was quite scientifically minded. What's the right way to do things? Quite closed off to the more kind of hippie stuff. And in my 20s, I remember trying meditation, but really, really like giving it a proper go, trying different ways of meditation and like not really getting anywhere with it. And I realized years later, like relatively recently, that's because I'm getting that from a practice. We've all experienced that where you've kind of got, bloody hell, have I done 20 minutes? Like, where's that time gone?
Yeah,
that's meditation, and all meditation is focusing on a relatively simple thing, and every time you lose focus, coming back to it. So breathing's the classic one in meditation, focusing on your breath. People will focus on a candle, focus on the light, or the classic Om. That's a transcendental meditation thing. It's a deliberately nonsensical syllable so that you don't think of stuff. If you were saying cheese, you'd start thinking about cheese. So Om is a deliberately nonsensical phrase so that your brain comes back to Om. Which what's Om? It just comes back to Om. I might be using Om incorrectly there, but transcendental meditation, you get a mantra, and it's deliberately nonsensical. And so I think kind of music is that. It's this kind of, I'm just doing this thing, hoping it somehow gets better. I'm just going to do it over and over again. And of course, Einstein famously said something to the effect of like, only a fool tries the same thing over and over again and expects a different result. But that's exactly what we do every single day when we're practicing. But of course, we're not actually doing the same thing. We're subconsciously changing it tiny, tiny amounts. And we do expect a different result, even though it might consciously be the same act we're performing. It is slightly changing, and we're getting input and output from that and tweaking. So, I think for me, it's just continuing that, not to sound too pretentious, but it kind of trying to continue that as a meditation for me is my practice. And occasionally, if I come up with something cool, trying to share it with the nice people on the interwebs, if I think it's helpful.
Yeah. Amazing. Lovely. I've never thought of alternate picking as meditation, but there you go. It is.
Shredding. That's all it is.
But then, like, I get most of my work, like I'm booked on a couple of shows that I've got coming up at the end of the month, and the only time that I can really sit down and do any work on it is when my kids are in bed. My wife comes home from work, we have dinner, and it's it's nearly always 10 o'clock. It's like, right, now I've got to go and do some work. And then it's midnight. It's like, where did those 2 hours go?
And it's the worst version of you as well, isn't it? Because you're totally depleted by that point of the day. Whereas, when we were gifted the luxury of time,
it was squandered. It was squandered frivolously.
Well, possibly. But so I think you've got to be realistic about what progress is. But to me, it's just getting closer to this vague concept of better, which changes all the time based on who I'm listening to and what my current interests are and all this sort of thing. But just feeling like, I did something today, or even I've done something these last couple of days, I'm still chipping away at whatever this is. I got back on the horse.
Yes, exactly. Well, I will say thank you very much for your time.
Not at all. A pleasure to chat.
It was lovely to chat, and best of luck with teaching and your daughter and everything else that's going on.
Thank you very much. Cheers for your time, and anytime. Be nice to chat again.
Absolutely.
Right, take